Adventures in Retouching with Rob DiCaterino.
Welcome to Adventures in Retouching, adventuresinretouching.com. I am Rob DiCaterino. Thanks for joining, thanks for watching. Today, I'm joined by my guest, friend, colleague, fellow retoucher, Remy Amezcua. Remy, thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me.
I am in New Jersey, in the U.S. Where are you, Remy?
Right now, I'm in Mexico, actually, because of the pandemic. Normally, I live in New York, but I'm in Mexico right now.
Mexico. And what, if we could just take 1 minute, what is the pandemic situation? What's the situation there in Mexico?
Well, I mean, very different from, say, New York. Right now, it looks more and more like the confinement is going to roll into the second wave. So there'll be no break. They had hoped, they created this stoplight system whereby red light, orange light, yellow light, green light. And so my mom, who's 91, she can only leave confinement until it's green light. But I think from what I see, they're gonna just roll on to the next wave, the second wave, which is supposed to hit sometime in October, November, and keep everybody confined until it's completely tackled. But yeah, you go out and there's people in the street, some without masks, unfortunately, some with, and yeah, you know, it's hard to assess. Lots of criticism towards the president and their approach, infrastructure. You know, personally, I feel they're doing what they can with what they have, and I think the numbers are pretty high in terms of that. But at the same time, you know, it could have been more dire, I feel. But you know, let's see what happens. You know, it's like quicksand. It changes very fast, it seems to me. And so supposedly they have it under control, but let's see what happens next. Yeah.
So Remy, why retouching of all things?
Since I was a little kid, I started taking photographs. So by the time I was 13, I said, "Oh, when I grow up, I want to be a photographer." You know, and I started working on the darkroom. The darkroom was always my passion, and that's how really the love of photography came. You know, exponential, I guess. Mixing chemicals and you know, processing paper, film, and then printing out your images, and that whole the magic of the darkroom, you know. And so then you know, I stuck with that dream. I moved to New York when I migrated to New York when I was 19, and I went to NYU, and I, I got accepted in the photo department, and it was a tiny little department, 100 students with the 4 different, um, you know, from freshman to senior, and you know, with the technical classes, they also had some history classes and also classes where they talked about, like, there was one class I took with a teacher. You might have read something. His name is Fred Richin. He wrote this book. I think it's called In Our Own Image. Great book, visionary book. I think written in '92 or something like that, '93. And the year I took that class, there was already a buzz about like what was coming. You know, nobody really knew. And remember, virtual reality was already a word that was being thrown around, and that you could see shows at the Guggenheim. And I took a class. It was called. I took 2 classes that semester. It was my junior year. It was my senior year, actually. One was called The Future of Imaging, which was with Fred, and the other one, unfortunately, I can't remember the teacher, but it was Introduction to Photoshop, and it was Photoshop 2.0. it was funny, especially when you think about how much it evolved from 2.0 to 2.5. I remember as we were in class, a preview of what was to come. Like we all got excited because 2.5 got released in November or something like that, and then I graduated, and of course I didn't have the money to buy a Mac, especially back then. Between my student loans and just owning a Mac was very expensive. And so, unfortunately, I got separated from Photoshop for a long, long, long time. But I started assisting photographers, and I was able to, my experience as an assistant, I was able to go from like at a professional level with slides, and then slides were the thing, and it was 400 rolls in one shoot, and learning how to shoot slides professionally and doing really well. And then eventually it became print. And then slowly, digital started to come in. I remember, I think it was the NBA All-Star game in Manhattan. We did. I worked with this photographer. We did digital capture for the NBA, and they were heavy files. They were something like I forget. It's a joke. Like this, the size of the images were like tiny, and I remember it was so taxing on the camera, and then yeah, just basically digital just started taking over, and doing jobs where like I remember my first job where we were going to shoot digital, and I just was like, typical assistant is like, oh, bring my cables just in case. And sure enough, we get on location, and they had packed the equipment wrong, and one bag didn't arrive, so the tethered cable was not there. And I remember I saved the day because I had a 6 foot firewire cable and firewire. I think it was the old one, the 400, and we were able to shoot. And then the bag arrived, and then it was all okay. But I remember from that day just thinking, well, if this is the future, I better start embracing it. So by then, we started having computers, laptops. By then, it's like 2003, and so just naturally, uh, actually, sorry to go back a little bit. By then, I had already had bought a desktop computer and was able to get a copy. I bought a copy. I bought a version of Photoshop. I think it was CS. It was before the CS time. It was Photoshop. I think it was 5, and I just learned it on my own. Asking questions and then just for the sake of the job of being able to understand what retouchers were doing for the photographers I was working for as a first assistant, and for my own artwork. Just trying to figure it out, and I have to say I went super slow. I took really my time. It was not uh, it was a very slow climb onto the digital world until I started really using it more as a tool to once printing the Epsons became much better, and I bought an Epson. I think it was the 1200, and so I started printing my own, and so of course I started to tweak my photos in Photoshop, and calibrating them, calibrating my ISO screen to my to my prints, and etc. And then slowly retouching for friends first, and then slowly getting clients. I've been making a living more or less on and off since 2007 in retouching. Long intro.
So Remy, do you still shoot, or
Yes.
where does
Yeah.
photography come in to
Yeah,
your life?
I still do it on a daily basis. Um, I take my iPhone photography very seriously, and I always try to have my. I I finally stepped up and bought a Sony, the A7 II, I think it was. It is, and I always try to have it handy, and unfortunately don't use it as much as I would like to. my phone, I take it pretty seriously, and yeah, I practice it quite often. In this pandemic, maybe not as much as I would have liked to, but otherwise, when I'm in New York, yeah, been working on a project consistently for the past 6 years with my iPhone actually.
At this point, do you consider yourself, I am a retoucher, I am a photographer, I'm both? Do you shoot professionally? Do you seek that, or are you really like, I'm a retoucher now?
No, I never really liked uh, those type of definitions. I feel they're limiting. Um, I would say I'm an image maker. I like to express myself through photography, but also through other mediums as well. One thing that I've learned through using the Mac is how much you can do other things. From writing, I write quite a bit to editing. I would love to edit more my own footage, but and to also prepping stuff to paint. I actually paint quite a bit, and yeah, I try to remain creative for sure. Photography is still the main, the starter, and from there it takes me to many different places. Retouching is something that I like because uh, I worked a lot for years as an assistant and on the technical part, whether it was lighting or a lot of travel photography, uh, mainly in fashion, but also doing other stuff. And so I feel like I naturally went on to becoming a digital technician, digitech, and I'm. It's about responsibility, right? About just backing up and not having backing up again, like backing up again, like 3 times, and just making sure that everything's okay and that at the end of the day there's no drama regarding the files, and so again I think the respect and patience towards the computer led me to some people don't like to sit in front of a computer looking at a screen, and it's not something I mind. I can do it for. I've learned over the years that if I stick to 8 hours, the next day I'm still okay. If I push it more, eventually it catches up on me and things start to hurt. But so I try to be civilized about it, and yeah, I underestimated myself for years regarding the retouching, and slowly I started to be more adventurous as to what I would say yes to, and I'm a purist, so for me it's really hard when people tell me, "Well, don't do a lot," because I often I listen to them, and I don't do a lot, and then they're like, "Oh, you didn't do anything." It's like, wait a minute, you're not paying attention. I did a lot, but I just especially people I think tend to expect things, and then they tell you just do your thing, and then when you drop it off, they're like, "What did you do?" So it was hard step to like join bigger clients that have higher expectations, and just the learning curve. I feel like I tend to go incrementally. I don't take big jumps. I feel like I'd rather be pushed, and I've had the luck to work with people like you, where you had patience with your demands, and once you saw I proved to you I was able to do it, then it went okay. I think my big problem is that I often big problem just because people want things fast, and so they don't respect the learning curve, but yeah, once I figure that out, usually I become faster and faster.
What would you say a big demanding client or a photographer is looking for in a retoucher? What are the key points?
There's there's one direction where you have the photographer who basically they have a vision, but they're not seeing it yet because it's a raw file, and you need to help them get there, you know. Uh, and sometimes I feel that getting there, people, it's a creative moment, and I don't think it's not, you know, I feel like, you know, sometimes you have files, you have 150 layers, but I feel that less is more, you know, kind of you're, you know, like Italian food, you know, or Mexican food, you know, like it's about not that many ingredients and in the end, magical results, you know. I like that approach. But of course, that's not realistic. A lot of people tell you, oh, I want it very simple, but then, you know, especially when it comes to skin, if it doesn't look like perfect, almost like rubber, they're like, what did you do? You know, like she still looks normal, you know, and so I think a lot of it. Um, I feel that the hardest client to get, the hardest relationship to build, is one where they trust your vision of what they want. You know, I think most of the times that trust is close to impossible to get to, you know, because they have expectations and they have a hard time expressing what their expectations are, you know. And a lot of times they'll tell you, don't do much, but actually that's not true. You know, they're actually expecting quite a bit, you know. And I see you're laughing because that happens so many times, you know. I've lost clients because they got scared, you know, where they were like, oh, no, I have another person. I'll try with them. And I'm like, all right, fine, no problem, you know. Uh, Most of the times when they let you be free, I feel that is when you get the best results because then, you know, as long as you don't make it about yourself and you try to connect with who they are, you get good results, you know, I feel. Sometimes, you know, I think one thing I learned a lot about slides was color balance, you know. Light films were so critical in terms of like color temperature and you know like after you know 1 year of doing it 2 years I, you know you would get to where like you look at the sky and you look at the model and you'd see like oh even before you get the color meter out you'd be like you know you'd call the filter whether it was 81A or 81B or whatever you know blue or yellow and or you know warm or cold you know and you know I think I try to approach it like that you know by color temperature. I feel oftentimes um, the color space of the raw file doesn't show it you know and you just need to cook it you know you need to make it nice and usually it's not that complicated you know
So Remy, one thing that you're saying is to be a good retoucher, you have to be a good translator. So like the example you gave where the clients, oh no, just a light touch, just do a little bit, when in reality, you're translating that based on your own experience.
yeah
No, not a light touch. I know that they want it to be totally transformed.
yeah
So yeah, there's a lot of translating, and that comes with time and experience and working with a variety of clients and a variety of studios. You just start to pick up on those kind
Yeah,
of things.
also from being on set and looking, you know, what photographers, stylists, art directors, makeup artists, and hairdressers let slide. You know, I've seen it. Uh, you know, I've had the luck to work with over 300 photographers in my life, and some really, really good ones in terms of fashion and in terms of the commercial world. And yeah, I find the best photographs were made by incredible teams. You know, where everybody was paying attention to the details. And so it's those little details that, at the end of the day, when you see the unfortunately, digital has created this mentality that's like, oh, we can fix it in post. You know, and it's unfortunate because I guess probably in all your interviews, that saying. Not to say the bad word, something bad in, well, something bad out. You know, it's very hard to to if you get something good in, well, then you can make it even better, you know. But I think it's a big mistake that a lot of people create, you know, which is like, oh, don't worry about the hair. No, the hair is critical. The hair should look incredible. The less you touch it digitally, the better off you are, because it's really hard to make it nice. And it's all hair needs to look natural. It can't be look fake, you know. And same goes with like any kind of image that you're making. You know, if you're shooting food photography, well, you know, if the food doesn't look good on the plate to begin with, then it's going to be hard to have a good photograph, because in the end, um, it's very simple. You should not focus on the technique when you're viewing. You should focus on what you're looking at. And in fact, the better it is, the more easy it looks, you know, even if it's super complex. But if you start having to like, oh, can you change the color of the shoe because it's the wrong shoe color, you know, or can you, and then you start like getting into that world where it's tricky to make it look real, you know. And the funny thing is that at the end of the day, the biggest fear, which is like, oh, I'm going to make less money because it's going to go faster, it wasn't true. Actually, it made my job easier and I could focus on doing it better, you know. And so in the end, there's this big thing. It's like, oh, let them do it wrong. Like that, I'll put in more hours. But actually, those are hours that are actually more painful than they are creative. You know, I think it's better to focus yourself on just doing as little as possible, very, very well. You know, I remember meeting a French traditional retoucher, meaning he would retouch from the negative or the slide, and then we print and then retouch the print. You know, I guess it's retouching is an old tradition in photography from its beginning. You you couldn't catch it in the moment, so you catch it in editing at some point. You know, be it like what's the name of the process? The I'm forgetting right now. Collodion, wet plate, I guess. I forget. Where basically the sky would be a huge problem. So they would once they would just paint the sky, they would white it out, and then you have these beautiful prints with lots of tones, but zero sky because it just the film could not hold it. So you know that's an example of very, very, very early retouching, and these were actually realists that were doing it. They were nature photographers, and they were doing early survey work of America, and there was no conflict as to the realism of the photograph, even though they were retouching the sky. They were cheating. But retouching, then you could go like more purist and talk about like what's the name of that photographer, Steve Mack, I'm spacing out of his name, who photographed the for National Geographic, the woman with the green eyes from Afghanistan. And you know he got into all this trouble because you know he's a straight shooter, right? He's a documentary photographer, and then turns out that he was retouching his photographs, and so you know it was problematic because it's supposed to be a slice of reality, but here he was like moving people to the right, combining photos, and even you know there's people that even say like the whole filter no filter uh, discussion that I feel is so fake because there's no such thing as a uncooked JPEG. By definition, a JPEG is already cooked. It's the way your camera translates your capture and decides what the values mean, you know, and creates a photograph. And it's like, oh, no filter. It's like, yeah, no filter is really a fool's game, you know. It's an illusion. Uh, there's always some kind of cooking, you know, whether it's the Kodak's recipe to make make their film, whatever their famous films, like Kodachrome or whatever film. It was like years and years of research and development to get to like where you just shoot a picture and you use your meter and it comes out the way you think you want it. And so Photoshop is actually, maybe you would say, it's like your own research and development enterprise, where to me retouching is anywhere from like throwing in a curve, an S curve, as simple as that, or changing the color balance a little bit more complex. And then, of course, moving pixels, that's already, it depends on your project. I think if you need to, if it's about the veracity of, um, of the photograph, then you shouldn't be moving any pixels because you're lying. But the fact is that, yeah, even if it's a raw file, you need to cook it. And so you're automatically retouching whether you want to see it like that. That I feel maybe it's a little bit too radical on my part, but that's, yeah, I have no issue seeing it like that. I think of Ansel Adams, for example, who used to spend hours in the darkroom. Most of the people, of the photographers that I follow, like say Eugene Smith, another guy who would refuse anybody to print his images. He had to print them himself. And you see like some of the shots, what he did to them, from the negative to the end result. Or pick another one, Richard Avedon. You've seen drawings where like they'll have a portrait and he'll have like plus minus dodging burning in like tiny little spots in a 11 by 14 print. So yeah, I mean, it's always been there, I feel. Yeah.
Remy, Steve McCurry was the
Thank you.
photographer. Just wanted to
And then, of course,
put that
there's
up.
the issue of like changing people's physiognomy to make them look better. And then you start entering into terms of like ethical questions. But I feel like people need to lay back on the retouchers because at the end of the day, it's more the photographer and more the art director and more the client. At the end of the day, unfortunately, we live in a world where they say jump and we say how high. If you're a retoucher and you start saying like, oh, I'm not gonna tuck her waist, to say, one of the big criticisms that a lot of women need to fit a certain stereotype and they get their body transformed, which, when I do it, I feel not good at all about it. But at the same time, I should either, am I part of the problem? Yes and no, because I feel that there'll always be somebody else that will replace me. That's not an issue, and I need to make a living. And yeah, I mean, I do. I try to go for clients that don't necessarily do that type of stuff. When they ask me, I usually, I often do say things like, if what you want is heavy retouching, I'm not the guy. I'm not gonna do it. I don't enjoy it, and I'm not gonna do your rubber skin. I'm just not into it. I feel like some people are into it, and good for them. But, yeah.
So Remy, is there such thing as dangerous retouching? Like you said, pushing in the waist, slimming that. Would you consider that dangerous?
For those of you that haven't been in the shoot, and for those of you that haven't, can confirm this, when you go on a shoot and you are on the side of the photographer and you look at the model and the whole team has built everything to look perfect, and then you go on the back and you look at from behind and you see the clamps holding the clothes and you see all the illusion being built. And the first time it's shocking. The first time you're like, whoa, none of these clothes fit. So where does the problem begin? It's a bigger issue, I think, that you're touching. Like this world of fast fashion or fast everything. Like fast turnaround. Uh, you know, uh, E-commerce, and the time that we have to do what we have to do. And a lot of time. I feel that a big measure of how good of a retoucher you are is how fast you are. If you're very good but you take 1 hour, well, you're not as good as the person who's not so good but does it in 15 minutes, because time is such an issue because of shrinking budgets and because of demands by the client. You know that the people that manage the accounts need to deal with on a daily basis, and so in that sense, um, it's frustrating as a retoucher to think, well, yeah, had you given me 15 more minutes, had I not felt this pressure to deliver by the end of the day, I think I would have done a better job. Um, is that dangerous? You also need to, I think, learn to let go, and not pick your battles. I think those are not battles that are, as a retoucher, you're a technician. I feel, and you need to be humble about it and just cut to the chase and try to do it. Try to feel good about what you deliver, but also keep in mind what they're asking from you, and also, unfortunately, with retouching, you commit before you see the stuff, and that's tricky because the people want a budget, they want an amount per hour, and they want the world, and they want it now, and you haven't even seen the images, and you 90% of the time, or 95% of the time, you commit, and once you commit, it's your reputation that's on the line, and if you don't deliver, then uh, too bad for you, So I think a lot of it is just like trying to keep it real with what you can and cannot do.
The expression, the camera adds 10 pounds. Why do people say that? What is that? Is that true?
When you work with people uh, that are models, that's it's not something you really see, because the reason they're models is because they photograph properly. I think of this idea of photogenic does it's real. You can take 100 pictures of me and you might get two. I've seen models where you take 100 and you don't even get to 100 because you see it. You see it live. That each shot is amazing. And that's, and you see models too that are photogenic but not all around, and they understand that and they work with it. I think the adding of pounds seems to me something more on video, and I think it's because of the movement. You're more exposed. There's 24 frames a second or however many. And so as a result, there's more chance to see the imperfections. I feel, the yeah, the, the lens is not objective. As much as we would like it to, it's got a bias, and each lens is different, and each brand makes different lenses. From the depth of field to how it compresses space to how the colors come through. It sounds obvious, but yeah, we can't forget that as much as we thought photography was about reality, it's it's made up for sure. It's definitely illusionistic, for sure. I feel.
Remy, something that you touched upon a few minutes ago, um, the better retoucher is faster. How does a retoucher get faster? What tools, or how do you do that?
Like say in sports, or anything, it's practice, right? Practice is key, and it's hard to practice retouching on your own. You kind of need the added incentive of like goal oriented. I feel um, maybe because I was born in 1970, and so video games first it started with the pinball, but I feel like goal oriented. That's what all video games are, right? They're goal oriented, and for me personally, uh, retouching is very goal oriented. So like it goes from like, okay, keeping your file nicely structured, very, very important, and just not having to add layers because you made mistakes, uh, um, uh, you know, the more logical your file looks, the easier it looks to like open it 6 months later and be able to figure out what you did, the better on one side. And then speed is about just understanding what tool you need to use, and not committing, not being stubborn, and enjoying the fact that Photoshop is, how do you say, non reductive, non destructive, and use the layers and not be afraid to like make a new layer. My introduction to the Mack, uh, once I was able to buy one, I remember I asked a friend who was a industrial designer who was really into Macs, and I was like, "What advice would you give a neophyte, somebody that's about to buy?" And he thought about it, thought about it, and he was like, "Learn the commands, and uh, personally, I love using a Wacom, and I just program enter on the click, and that's it. Everything else is disabled, and then I used my other hand and just used as many. I program my own commands even now, and I have them programmed for the tools that I use the most, and then I also use actions. I use a lot of actions that I take my time to build, and I find those actions great because once you get an action, the problem is that you often want to try to reinvent. I find like I was like, oh, this was great how I did it, and then I'm like, oh, how did I do it? And then I start trying to figure out how I did it, and then I make a new way, and then like that, and then it's a new way, and it's like very Sisyphus like. And so I started to like really uh, trying to like really make actions that were a little bit more complex, and then it's just a button. I turn them into buttons and I press the button, and I try to label them very clearly so that like right now with the pandemic, that I didn't retouch as much. When you open Photoshop, that you're not like, what was that one? So it makes sense, and it's a universal sort of like it could apply to anything, and yeah, things like that. I find those can help you go faster. Also focusing, like being rested, well rested, with the goal in mind, and not beating around the bush, like really just getting to the point and committing, and then often too, if you notice you're going too slow, well, stop and try to think about, well, what is it that you're. Sometimes it's better to turn it off and start again, even though that sounds crazy, but oftentimes I feel like you gotta be careful, with how you're going about. You know? Yeah.
Yeah, I had a manager, I had a retouching manager at Martha Stewart. His name was Scott. And he used to say exactly what you just said all the time, was like, it's 6 o'clock at night and they just I'm struggling with this image because of all the markups and what they want, how they want it transformed or whatever. If I just put it away, go home and come back tomorrow, I know I'll be able to knock it out in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Like I'll be rested. And so yeah, that's important, to rest the eyes, rest the body, rest the mind, and come back refreshed. And I'm surprised by how much of a difference that makes. So that's really good advice.
Yeah. Well, I think it talks to the nature of retouching, which is actually very creative, and that's the conundrum I feel, because you're being asked to execute consistently, but you need to find creative solutions. You can't just be. You're not a robot. You need to find fast creative solutions, and being creative. Photoshop can be very technical, but you need to think outside of the box, and so sometimes the tools that you need to use are outside of your comfort zone, and you need to like push your limit. You know, every time I get to sit with a retoucher, I learn so much. You know, so much so fast because just you see the way they operate, and it's a whole different world. And that's the thing with Photoshop is you need to go from A to Z, but from A to Z there's an infinite number of ways to get there. From the most complex, and even you could say like getting the same result. Let's not say a different result. It's just the same result. There's so many ways, and even in the times of speed, they can even all be the same speed, but there's just so many ways. It's really mind blowing how Photoshop is complex in that sense.
So Remy, in addition to Photoshop actions, what are your other frequently used tools?
I use a lot the eraser, actually. I use a lot. I go into quick mask, and I'm always switching between black and white and content aware move tool. I honestly can say that I don't uh, I don't use the program to its full capacity. I know there's a whole another dimension to it, whether it's the 3D aspect of it or even the types of modes of erasers or slowing stamps that I'm not that I just don't use. If I would have to say what percentage, I would probably say I use 30% of it. Maybe does that sound bad? Maybe not. Maybe more. Really, the digital darkroom for sure. It's a cliche, but I do believe. Um, I still love the darkroom, and I feel the darkroom is a very creative space, and I think Photoshop is very similar. In fact, the people that created it, the first tools are all taken from the darkroom.
So Remy, we've covered so much ground. This is fantastic and amazing. So thank you so much. Where do you see our industry going in the future? And also, how about your own future?
You know, I it's hard to have a crystal ball and see what's going to happen. I do think, yeah, like I said, e-commerce, the the need to shop online is going to just keep on growing. The competition is going to get you know harder and harder, and yeah, I think the future in terms of this digital world. I don't even think that we necessarily need to fear artificial intelligence. I really do think that even if that comes out as being possible, I still think that ideas are where it's at. I think the world of ideas. I have a hard time seeing that in my lifetime that will lose its value. I feel like, on the contrary, ideas are on the rise. And if you have ideas, you're going to be welcome.
Well, Remy, thank you so much. You know what? Where can people find you online or view your work or get in touch with you?
Oh, I guess Remy Amezcua at gmail.com. And it's Remy, and then Amezcua, Amezcua at gmail.com.
So yes, this has been Adventures in Retouching, adventuresinretouching.com. I'm Rob DiCaterino.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you for watching. Thank you, Remy.
Bye.
Hold on. We have the YouTube channel, so go to youtube.com, search Adventures in Retouching. I'm on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, the website, adventuresinretouching.com. So you can listen to the audio version, you can watch the video version, leave comments, like, subscribe, ask questions, email me, get in touch. I'm here to help. My guests are here to help. Thank you, everyone, for stopping by. We'll see you soon.
All right. Be safe. Bye.